Welcome, listeners, to the 8th installment of the UBERED podcast. I'm your host, Evan Kale. For 4 years, I was a full-time Uber and Lyft driver in Minneapolis, St. Paul. I wrote 2 books on the subject, UBERED, My Life as a Rideshare Driver, and the sequel, UBERED 2, both available on Amazon in paperback and Kindle. Listeners, it's no secret that these books are highly controversial. I myself have come under fire for some of the opinions and attitudes that I have conveyed in the books, both in terms of the things that I did behind the wheel and the way that I criticized the people who entered my car. Since publishing in 2016, the book has been met with mostly positive reviews. In fact, those who have liked it seem to have loved it. But there's some who have been wildly offended by some of the things that I have said. One reviewer called me a misogynistic, self-centered sociopath, which, at least call me Mr. first. Other reviewers have called me a mean-spirited jerk. I like to think that I'm a nice guy. In fact, if you talk to my friends, I bet they'd say the same thing. It's just, I had some very extreme opinions about some of the people that got in my car, some of the things that I heard, and just doing this as a job, it kind of compounded my frustration. One of the avenues to curb that frustration was to write a book, and so I did. It's an accurate account of what it's like to be an Uber and Lyft driver, and if I sat and wrote only nice things about the people that got in and out of my car, I wouldn't have enough material for 2 books. It's the criticism of people. It's the witnessing the insane stupidity of the masses day after day. It's enough to make you stop in your shoes and say, wait a minute, I should probably characterize this. I'm going to. And so as you characterize everything you see every day, it's largely a negative opinion of people. It's a negative takeaway, and that's just the reality of it. So segueing into this episode, if you didn't think I was a jerk before, you might think I'm a jerk now, because this episode is called I Hate You. This is all of the people that got in my car that did shit that pissed me off, or that just, as a rideshare driver, I would be pulling up and I would see them coming out and I'd think to myself, I hate you already. And when I got into this, I didn't think I would hate anybody. In fact, I wasn't sure what to expect, but the first sociological group of people that I would be driving that I came to hate were college kids. I thoroughly enjoyed my time in college. I graduated in 2012 and I started rideshare driving in 2015. In 3 short years, I had separated myself from that group so far in terms of mental age that I could hardly even believe it had been so short of a time. They seemed like children and I seemed like an adult almost every single time they entered my car. For one, and this is because I was driving at night, they were almost always overly intoxicated, which meant not only was there a high likelihood that they would puke, but they were loud, they behaved like baboons, they insisted on blasting terrible music. We'll talk about this in a minute. They neglected seatbelt laws, they tried to stuff 8 kids in my car, and conversation generally went something like this. Dude, you party? Dude, I bet you love pussy in this car, dude. Dude, how fast is this car? Oh, dude, my dad has his car. Whoa, no way, bro, nuggets. Or, if they were girls, excuse me, Mr. Driver Man, do you think that you could turn up the heat a little bit? I'm kind of cold. That was the thing that I noticed amongst college girls is they called me Mr. Driver Man. Holy fuck, my name is 4 letters. It's not even an uncommon name, Evan. It's not even. Sometimes people call me Even, and that just that one always makes me stop in my tracks. I look at people when they call me Even and I go, do you really think that a parent would name their child Even? No. Go drink a gallon of bleach, please and thank you. Anyway, so they called me Mr. Driver Man. Mr. Driver Man. Like all of them did, especially the St. Thomas girls. I'll talk about St. Thomas in just a minute. And they never, ever, ever tipped. Ever. It was like they thought their beauty was tip enough, which might sound like a misogynistic comment. I swear to fucking God, that's exactly what it was. I realized that the college crowd is notoriously poor. I sure know that I was when I was in college. But men sometimes would tip me. Like, dudes that were in college, not often, but sometimes. Women, forget it. Never once, never, ever, ever, ever. It was like the prettier they were, the worse tier of passenger they made. And the same was true when they would fart. Sometimes pretty girls had the worst farts, and they would do it. It was never audible, but they would do it, and it would fucking stink to high heaven. And it's just me and her in the car. It wasn't me. It had to have been her.
And, just sitting there looking on the phone like, my tooth smell like flowers.
Sometimes I would put down all the windows after that just to emphasize the fact that, yeah, lady, your shit does stink. And also from college girls, particularly from good-looking ones, I got the I'm better than you attitude more than anyone else. Like, when I would end up in really rich suburbs like Lake Minnetonka area, that was just kind of a given. It was just how the people would behave. But for college girls, it was obscene. Case in point, calling me Mr. Driverman instead of simply using my name. College girls also notoriously couldn't hold their alcohol. And if there had been any drama going on that night, forget it. It all came spilling out in my car, and I had to fucking listen to all of it. The worst one, there's a bar called Sally's at the University of Minnesota. Sally's kept me fed for years when I was in college. They had Taco Tuesdays for the price of a soft drink. It was like $2. You could get the taco bar, and I would load up on like 5 pounds of tacos, just stuff my face, because that would be my only meal for the day. Anyway, in this story, I pull up to Sally's. It's a cold Saturday night. It's maybe about 9:30 or 10, and these two girls come out. One of them can walk fine, and the other one is fucking drunk. And so the friend opens up my front door, leans in, goes, "Hey, you're going to be driving my friend home." Great. She deposits her friend, who's sobbing, in the front seat. And then she just goes, "Okay, this driver is going to take you home. He's going to take really good care of you now. Have a good night." It's like, yeah, you're definitely not going to tip. Okay, fine. So we start driving, and the friend doesn't say hello, doesn't acknowledge me whatsoever. I'm like just the help. I'm there to drive her home, and that's it. So she just, through her sobs, she whips out her phone and dials, and I just hear, "Mom, I want to go back to North Dakota. I never should have left North Dakota." Okay, I'll stop for the sake of your ears. But that shit went on for 5 minutes, just like that. By the time that she got out of the car, I swear to God I had hearing loss. Ugh. All right, let's transition out of college girls. Let's start talking about the colleges themselves. And really, there were only 2 schools that I was catching rides from. So there's a few colleges in the Minneapolis-St. Paul metro area. There's St. Kate's, which is an all-girls school, and it's kind of in the further bounds of St. Paul. Or it's in the area where if I would catch a ride to St. Kate's, I would probably... I call it the St. Paul gravitational pull. If you're doing a ride in St. Paul, chances are the next passenger is only going to be going further and deeper into St. Paul. And if you end up by the St. Kate's area, you're screwed. You're going to end up in a distant suburb like Maplewood, which ending up out there, as I said in episode 1, is the worst thing that could happen to your business. Getting hit by another Uber driver on the 1-year anniversary of giving your very first ride down to the minute, I guess that's a close second. Anyway, so there's St. Kate's, there's Hamlin, which the story I told you about the fighter, they were going to Hamlin. I can only think of a few instances of passengers going to Hamlin. I don't know why. I guess Hamlin kids just didn't end up in my car very often. But by Hamlin, now we have St. Thomas. Let's talk about St. Thomas. I almost went to school there. When I applied to colleges, I only applied to the University of Minnesota and to St. Thomas. I didn't apply out of state. I didn't apply anywhere else. I wanted to go to the University of Minnesota, but it was really hard to get into, and I had a shitty ACT score. They waitlisted me. St. Thomas took me. I showed up at orientation without even touring the school, maybe 2-3 months before school was supposed to start, and I realized I had made a terrible mistake. This place was not for me. This is a private Catholic college. It's hideously expensive, and it's kind of got the feel of, the snobby high school that I went to. It just seemed like I had made a glorious mistake. So as we're registering for classes, I got up and I walked out. And the nun asked me, "Where are you going?" And I looked at her and I go, "University of Minnesota." And so I walked out the door. I utilized every contact I had. I got in touch with some fraternity guys at the University of Minnesota. They said, "You pledge our fraternity. We'll show you a loophole how to get into school here." Yada, yada. That's how I became a frat boy, and that's how I went to the University of Minnesota, was these guys showed me this loophole. Anyway, so St. Thomas kids, rowdy drunk, super snobby, super spoiled. Maybe 1 in 2 would say the comment, "Oh, my dad has this car," or, "Yeah, my dad used to have this car." Something about their father or somebody in their family owning the BMW that I was driving. They were just consistently, men, women, all of them, they were just fucking snobby douchebags. And a lot of times they would patronize me about being an Uber driver. They'd ask what a young guy like me was doing in a fancy car driving people around, and I'd try to tell them my ambitions about writing and how I had gotten into Uber and my screenwriting and all that stuff. And usually I learned to not tell them anything, because it always ended with them either making fun of me or doing something that was just really fucking snobby or mean or small. Like, it didn't make me feel good when they would get out of the car afterward. On one of my early trips, this is a story in UBERED, I had these St. Thomas kids. They were going from St. Thomas and St. Paul to Dinkytown at the University of Minnesota, the college town at the U, where there's like bars and nightlife and such. So these kids are in the car, and like it's a sub-zero night out. Most of them are wearing athletic gear, like jerseys and like athletic shorts and stuff. Well, the ones in the back seat, they're all drunk, and they get into like a fight, and it's like a sibling kind of fight, like, dude, stop, faggot, you're a faggot, bitch-ass faggot, you suck cock like a Russian whore faggot, and they're hitting each other and slapping each other, and they're not listening to me to stop. So finally, the kid sitting in front is behaving himself, and I look over at him, I go, man, I'm sorry, and I scream, Arctic Blast! And I engage the child locks on the windows, and I put down all the windows and open the sunroof at the same time, and it was like a hatch blew on an airplane. These kids go from fighting to screaming bloody murder, and they're begging me, oh God, roll up the windows! And I just roar over this noise, children, are we going to behave now? And all of them are just like, yes! And I just go, good, and I put the windows up. Nobody says a word when the windows go up, and one person in the back squeaks, you're pure evil. And I go, don't you forget it. And then when I dropped them off in Dinkytown, I gave the one who said that the meet the parents, the stink eye, where, you know, Robert De Niro points to his eyes and then points at Ben Still. I did the same thing. I damn well better have haunted that kid's dreams after that. I hope I did. I probably did. Anyway, so that's my takeaway on the St. Thomas kids, is they're a bunch of spoiled, snobby little fucks. But the University of Minnesota kids, I guess they weren't as spoiled or snobby, but they engaged in the one behavior that all college students engaged in more than anyone else of any other sociological group that I drove. And that behavior is called clown car riding. And it went a little something like this. I pull up to a bar or to a frat house or like a student apartment building or whatever. One or two come out and they get in the car and they go, hang on, we got a couple more friends coming. Okay. And then one or two more come out. And then 5 or 6 more come out. And they legitimately think that it is okay to turn your car into a rolling joke. Like, they want to cram all these kids in this car so that they don't have to pay the inflated fee for an Uber or Lyft XL or a larger vehicle that can properly accommodate all of them. And they all say either the same excuse. They either say, we'll tip you really well, like if I had a nickel for every time I heard that. And the times that I would do it, the tips never exceeded more than $3. Or, and I'm not making this up, my dad's a cop. That was what they would say to try and break traffic laws or seatbelt safety laws, is, my dad's a cop. My dad's a cop, so it's fine. You know, we can just completely disregard road safety. Fuck it. My dad's a cop. It's cool. Just, if you are in college, if you are paying an obscene amount of money for higher learning, you obviously aren't learning anything if you think that something like this is okay. I mean, really, I think the only thing anyone really learns in college is that college is a scam. But that's neither here nor there. All right, let's spend $100,000 so that you can get a job making $30,000 when the interest is compounding faster than you'll be able to pay it off. Oh, you want to make more than $30,000? Okay, go back to school and amass another $250,000. Then you'll be good. Then you'll be able to make $60,000 and still not be able to pay for it. Hooray for higher learning! That's right, my fictitious narrator who reads the Lyft emails. Hey, Lyft driver! He also does the college is a scam rant, because he can't get work in this economy either. I'm just getting slightly off track. Let's keep talking about clown car riders. Okay, Jesus Christ, I'm sorry, I won't subject you to that voice again. So, the thing though with the clown car riders, the thing that just boggles my mind, okay, not only, you can see the problem just looking at it, but here's the nitty-gritty part about it. You are actively asking a driver to blatantly disregard traffic laws. So, if there's an accident, it doesn't matter whose fault it is. That driver is so fucked it's not even funny. The driver has willingly engaged in vehicular negligence, and if anybody is injured as a result, that driver is directly responsible, and insurance is likely not going to cover anything. If you're just blatantly disregarding the law, you're probably not going to be covered. So let's say I fit 8 people into my car, and we got into an accident, and one person got seriously injured. I'm directly responsible for that person's injury, and my insurance isn't going to pay for it. So for the prospect of a quote-unquote big tip, which won't exceed $3, I'm putting everything on the line. And I'm doing that so that this college student doesn't have to pay an extra $2 or $3 to get a proper vehicle to ensure that everyone is getting a safe ride. On top of that, if I'm stopped by the cops, I can get a ticket. Even if there is no accident, I can still lose my job as a rideshare driver because rideshare companies will suspend or terminate a driver for a traffic violation if it's serious enough. And I've heard they do it for speeding tickets, so I can only imagine for something like this what they would do. And in addition to this, I mean, not only is it just a wild risk that you're asking a driver to assume, but you are trashing a driver's car when you try and turn it into the New York City subway. I remember the few times that I did do this, just how muddy and disgusting my car was after this. Because people, they're fitting in like all angles. So like there's like feet up on the ceiling, on the glass, and it destroys the car for the night. Now, the way that the system used to be set up, if you arrived and a passenger starts to pull this shit, you had to drive them or else your driver's score took a hit. You had to cancel the ride, and that went against you, even if you as a driver weren't doing anything wrong. They have since changed that. I think they've changed that. I don't know. But as far as my Uber and Lyft accounts go, they had not changed that. You were still penalized as the driver for taking steps to ensure that everything was safe. And to be fair, college kids were not the only people that did this. It's just they exhibited this behavior far more than anyone else. One of the most ridiculous examples I can think of this actually wasn't a college student. It was a middle-aged woman. I pulled up to a Foot Locker in the suburb of Richfield. It's like a Thursday night, summer, sundown. And as I'm pulling up, I see this woman, this great big woman. She's probably about 300 pounds. She's got, I shit you not, a bucket of KFC in her hand. She's stuffing her face. And there's 8 children standing around her. And there's like enough shoes to fill up Kanye West's closet. And so I'm pulling up and I'm thinking like, this can't be her. And I see her exhibiting the typical body language of a passenger waiting for a ride, like looking at their phone, looking up at me, checking me against the phone. And I'm thinking like, okay, maybe I'm just driving like a few of these kids or something. No, she signals to the kids like, everyone load up, and I keep the doors locked. And I'm sitting here, I'm thinking like, okay, I'm gonna let this unfold and see what happens. So she starts trying to like open the door, and like all the kids are like trying to get in the car and like, you know, fill up my trunk with all these shoes. And I crack the window. The woman's name is Teresa, and I go, Teresa, surely you see the problem here. And she's bewildered, and she's like, what? It says Uber, BMW 3 Series. That's you, ain't it? It's like, Teresa, I can't fit this many people in my car. You need to call an XL. And she loses her shit on me. She goes, oh, hell no. I ain't getting no fine so you can pull this crap on me. Open the door, Uber driver. And I just chuckled, rolled up the window, and I drove away. So let's stop talking about clown car riders, because I've got 2 other tiers of these passengers where I came to categorize them as something. Let's next talk about motel room riders. A motel room rider treats your car like a Motel Room 6. They think that it's a spot where they can stuff their face or smoke a cigarette or clean themselves, like, you know, start applying deodorant and like cleaning things on their face and stuff like that, or they can change all their clothes, or they can hook up. It's like your car was a Motel 6, and it doesn't matter that you have other people. You have to drive after this person gets out. It doesn't matter that it's your car, it is your vehicle, it is not their vehicle. They don't care. They seem to see you as a rolling lounge. Now, I don't personally eat fast food. Every year I make up New Year's resolutions. You can call me a pretentious snob all you want. A couple years ago, my New Year's resolution was to give up fast food, and so I haven't eaten fast food in like maybe 5 or 6 years now, and I feel great about it. That was probably one of the most constructive New Year's resolutions I've ever made and followed through with. Another one was flossing my teeth every day, which I started doing 8 years ago, and that was also a good one, but okay, I'll stop. And another one was to stop shape-shagging. Got a little work to do on that one, and I told you Bushwhacker Bill was coming back. He'll keep coming back. Oh, Bill's always coming back for another body, Ace. So, anyway, I particularly did not enjoy when somebody was eating fast food in my car, because once you stop eating that shit, you can't even imagine how other people do. It just smells awful. Now, combine that with the fact that I mentioned this in episode 1. I have misophonia. For those of you who don't know what it is, or a recap, I'm on the autism spectrum, which probably doesn't come as a surprise if you've been listening to some of this without knowing that little tidbit of information about me. The sound of breathing, chewing, slurping, like noises that a person can make with their mouth, generally in regards to chewing and eating, it's like nails on a chalkboard for me. It brings out these fight or flight responses in my brain that are just downright primal. So being confined in a car with that for potentially a long period of time, when I'm already being removed from my comfort zone by being introduced to the awful smell of fast food, well, there's a reason I smoked a lot of dope when I was an Uber driver. So these were what I came to call motel room riders. Now, building on that, there was another tier I came to call locker room riders, which is, it's basically motel room riders plus. It's people that, it's like they were just at the gym and they're changing in the back of your car, or they're just going to fucking sweat all over the back of your car. Like I had this one girl, she had been out running and she ran too far and she couldn't run home. So she called me, and I pick up, and she just sweats like a dog all over the back seat of my car. There were like puddles of sweat when she got out. Typical example. Another, it's like the smell of like old laundry. It's like a person hasn't changed their clothes in a while. And the odor that they track in through their clothes, it doesn't go away fast. It's this musty, lingering smell that continues to linger throughout the day. And a lot of times, I would have to get my car cleaned. I mentioned that I had an unlimited car wash pass. It was $55 a month. I could use it every day if I wanted. They not only did the exterior, they did the interior too. But I would have to, I sure got my money's worth, because you get these people, they get in, they ruin the car, you have to have it cleaned, and then maybe the next day, the same thing happens. So let's talk about trip 2827. Garrett, the biggest piece of shit ever, because he's a great example of a lot of what I'm talking about right now. So it was a Friday night in September. I remember I had a martial arts tournament the next day, so I wasn't going to be out too late. I was just going to catch a couple rides, make a couple bucks, and that was going to be that. So I pull up to this bar in northeast Minneapolis, and it's still pretty early. It's maybe about 9:30 or 10. And I'm waiting for somebody on Lyft named Garrett who's rated 5 stars. And it's like kind of a pudgy guy, younger guy in the picture, maybe late 20s or so. So I'm waiting outside this bar. Minute goes by, 2 minutes, 3 minutes. I text, no response. I call, no response. 4 minutes. Just as it's about to be 5 minutes, this woman comes out. She's very good looking. She's in a red dress, like, well, you'd imagine like a model to look like, but she's got straight black hair. She almost looks like the devil's bride, if you will. She looks like she's from hell. There's just something about her. If I was a casting director looking for succubi, I'd pick this girl. Anyway, she peers into my window and she taps on it, and she's got this look. It's like the definition of somebody who looks inconvenienced. Now, this is my first interaction with her. I didn't keep them waiting for long. I arrived within maybe 2 or 3 minutes of them calling me. So I have no idea what she could possibly be miffed about. And I put the window down. She goes, "You here for Garrett?" "Yeah." "Okay." And then she walks away and goes back into the bar, and it's like, so I guess I'm going to keep waiting then? That's it? Really? Okay. Well, 2-3 minutes later, she comes out with the guy who I recognized in the photo as Garrett. So, and I don't think I've ever mentioned this. Lyft allows a passenger to upload a profile picture to help the driver identify them. Now, some people do stupid shit like upload pictures of their dogs. It's like, no, I'm not driving your dog. I'm driving you. I don't need a photo of your dog. If you want to tell me about your dog, we can talk about your dog. But I don't need a photo of that on the profile account. That's not the function of this. Anyway, so I recognize that this is Garrett because it's a Lyft ride, not an Uber ride. Uber doesn't let you do profile pictures from the photo. And he seems like he's heavily intoxicated. This woman's like not dragging him into the car, but she's in charge here. She deposits him in the back seat, and then she gets in with him too. And he looks at me, and like his eyes are kind of looking in different directions. But he looks at me, and I go, "Hi, you're Garrett?" He doesn't say a word. He looks at me, and then he looks to her, and it's like, he's looking at her like, do I have permission to speak? And so she just goes, "Okay, it's all in there. Drive us." He doesn't say a word to me. The ride's off to a bad start. I offer them water. Now, this was something I would do not only to incite a tip, because generally when I offered people bottles of water, they were so happy. They would not always, but generally they would tip me afterward. At the very least, people were always thrilled to be getting water. Well, I offered it to them. They don't say a word, and I reached under my seat and I handed them each a bottle of water, and they looked at me like I was trying to poison them. Garrett still doesn't say a word to me, and the harpy just kind of snatches the bottles out of my hand, doesn't really say anything to me. So I'm thinking like, okay, this lady is so rude. I don't know what is going on here, but I do not deserve to be treated like this at all. I've done nothing wrong so far. I was on time. I've been polite. I waited. I've given them water. What the hell is going on here? So we drive maybe 2 blocks, and then I hear Garrett complaining about how he's hungry, and the woman goes, "Stop at White Castle." And she grabs Garrett, and they just start feverishly making out. Now, like I said, chewing is the big one that sets off my misophonia. Kissing is a big one too. So now suddenly it's like there's pins on my brain. And we're about to be pulling onto the highway heading to St. Paul because their ride is like, I'm going to be stuck with these people for like 20 minutes. So I glance in back and I notice that, I mean, she's like basically straddling him. So like they're not wearing their seatbelts. And they go, hey, can you guys buckle up? And she goes, we're not going to get into an accident. She just like kind of says it over her shoulder. And I think to myself, oh, you want to smart mouth me? I'm going to make you regret every foot of this drive. So as soon as I'm sitting waiting to turn left onto the highway, and as soon as the light turns green, I flip the car into Steptronic mode, which my car is an automatic, but BMWs come with an option. It's called Steptronic. It gives you the option to control what gear you're in. It's great for like racing and driving fast and such. So I downshift and I fucking floor it. And these two, I mean, gravity embraces them both with hard love. They're just tumbling around the back, and they're both screaming, and I'm just sitting there smiling, and I go, I warned you, put on your seatbelts. So I hear her go, oh, what a fucking asshole. Well, instead of heeding my advice, they keep ignoring it. They don't put on their seatbelts, and they continue trying to make out as they're, like, bouncing around the back seat. She goes, are you the worst driver ever? And I go, if you don't like physics, put on a seatbelt. I am quickly losing my patience with these two. I mean, like I said, it's the misophonia, it's the sound of the kissing that's really pushing me over the edge. But I absolutely hate these two now. They have been so fucking rude to me. So then she calls me a fucking asshole. And then they keep making out. And then Garrett says, tell them not to forget to stop at White Castle. So finally I snapped. I turn around and I go, Garrett, I am right here. I am 3 feet away from you. You have yet to acknowledge me as a driver. I'm doing you a courtesy right now. Please treat me with some degree of respect. Even after saying this, he doesn't even look at me. He just leans in closer and he says again to her, White Castle. And then they keep making out. So by this point, I'm actually considering just leaving them on the side of the road. I hate them so much. But I'm a sucker, and I decided I was going to stop at White Castle for them. And what do? They order every single thing off of the menu. They spent like $30. They proceeded to eat all of it in my car, chewing as loudly as they could. They made a huge mess. It was like they were trying to check every single fuck you Evan box they could. Garrett, oh boy, what a real charmer there. I overheard him say to this woman, yeah, you like slobbering on my dick, don't you, bitch? Like, somewhere along the middle of the ride, I remember hearing this being uttered and just thinking to myself, like, who are these people? Who is this guy who's like, I mean, it's almost like she's a succubus sent from hell and she's got his soul by a string, because this guy is like a well-trained dog. He's not looking at me. He's not speaking to anyone but her. He's not, like, his eyes have just been glued to her this entire time. I think she might have actually stolen his soul. Meanwhile, she's the devil in the red dress. She is the closest thing I've ever seen to a hellion. You know what? Fuck it. I hate them both. After this trip, I'm going to give them 1 star. I'm going to write about this trip, and then I'll never, ever think about it again. And so I did. This was my worst story from UBERED. Or this was the story. People would ask, so, like, what was the worst trip? This was the worst one just because I hated these two so much. Because they were so incredibly rude. I still don't understand what I could have possibly done. But it was hard. It's still hard now to retell this story and capture what it was like to be me dealing with this. Because I'm, like, even now that I'm telling this story, I'm getting the sense that you as the listener, you're not quite grasping all the frustration that there was to be had in this trip. I mean, I almost quit driving. I hated these two so much. It was that bad. But let's segue away from the gross stuff. Let's talk a little bit about the business aspect, particularly tipping culture. I've said it before, I don't want to repeat myself, but you should always tip your driver. And one thing that always kind of bewildered me, whenever I picked up service industry people who didn't grasp this, like a waiter or a server, they're sitting there counting their tip money in their hands. They know damn well I'm part of the service industry too, and I qualify for a tip just as much as they do. And yet they don't tip at all. I'd always want to be like, do you understand how your own industry works? Because I'm not going to break down all that's wrong with the restaurant industry. But those people survive on their tips. Most people that are working in service industry, whether they be dog walkers, doormen, valets, waiters, bartenders, or rideshare drivers, they need tips to survive. The wage that they are paid per hour does not compensate them properly for the job that they are doing or what they need to survive. And one thing I noticed about tipping, the more somebody brags about how awesome they are of a tipper, the worse they tip. I mean, something is always better than nothing, but if you're going to sit there in the back seat and brag about how awesome of a tipper you are, how much you get the struggle of the driver, and then you leave them $1, no.
either leave me in the company of Abraham Lincoln or else don't open up your fucking mouth at all.
I mean, I guess tipping is kind of its own weird, unique thing here, and it has to be done with a proper degree of care. You can't ever insinuate you want a tip. You can't ever ask for a tip. It's at the mercy of someone else. And really, I mean, even scrutinizing their tipping when they're tipping at all is, in a way, I guess you could say it's kind of rude. But coming from a decade, goddamn, I've been in the service industry for a decade now. Coming from a decade of working in this business, you've got to do something for people that are working in the service industry, doing you these kinds of remedial tasks. It's the only way to keep the system functioning, especially if you have people that are going above and beyond what is being asked of them. So the theory of tipping, it's kind of like Darwinism. The people that are really good at the service industry get the best tips, and they can survive and flourish in the industry versus those who don't get tipped and are weeded out because it's too hard to survive on your own without the tips. But then you throw people into the mix that are consumers that don't understand how the culture works, and it kind of breaks everything. So here's a good example. You know, like, it would be nice if I got tipped all the time. I didn't always deserve it, especially the way that I treated some people. Sometimes I drove fast, sometimes I got short with people. Sometimes I did appalling or said appalling things to people, as you can read in my books. But other times, boy, I really bent over backwards to help people, whether it be carrying groceries into their house for them, or helping them move, something that's going above and beyond the task of simply transporting you from point A to point B. It got so bad, at least with grocery store runs, that I elected to never pick anybody up from a grocery store ever, because that's way more work than what it's needed. That's somebody who lives close to the grocery store or the place where they have shopped, so the trip isn't going to be expensive at all. They expect you to help them load up the car. They expect you to help them bring everything in. And 99 times out of 100, they're not going to tip you. And if they do tip you, it'll be like $1. Versus you've spent more time than you would on another trip because you have had to load up the car, you've had to unload it, and you've had some physical labor involved in the task as well. And these are people that think that that's all part of your job description and you just don't deserve anything on top. One time I hurt my back helping somebody carry in their groceries. They didn't tip me, and I was in pain for about 3 days afterward. My payout was $3.10 from that ride, so for $3.10, I had 3 days of pain. As you can see, that can get kind of frustrating. So hopefully you're understanding the point I'm trying to make here, that non-tippers can kind of break the system, or at the very least strain it. But nobody strains the system like long-distance callers. One piece of criticism that I have faced in my rideshare account is my market, the Minneapolis-St. Paul market, it's not like other markets. Other markets, they're not quite as vicious as this one in that, like, say you're in New York City. Well, if you leave New York City, you're going to get plenty of rides. You're not going to have to drive far out because there's such a high concentration of people. The dead miles thing, it's like not really a thing there. But when you have a market like Minneapolis-St. Paul, where all the people live in a like one concentrated kind of a smaller area, but the marketplace encapsulates maybe 200 square miles, and only 20 square miles of that have a high degree of people or like high influx of calls, then you can see how the system might get strained, because once you leave that concentrated area, you're stuck doing these dead mile calls where you're driving obscene amounts of distance between riders and passengers. You're not getting paid for it, and you're expected to keep doing it because you have to keep an acceptance ratio for the rides that you're taking. It's on Lyft, the last that I've checked, and they may have since changed this, but the last I checked, Lyft wanted drivers to be taking 90% of calls coming through, and Uber wanted 80%. To refuse was to be penalized, maybe even kicked off as a driver. And to add insult to injury, you never knew where passengers were going because Uber and Lyft to this day withhold that information from the driver. So most people don't understand how this works. And in the Minneapolis-St. Paul marketplace, yeah, if you're in downtown St. Paul or downtown Minneapolis, then that's fine. But as soon as you leave that immediate metro area and you start driving around in the suburbs, chances are a passenger is only going further away. You're not going to be making as much money because the suburbs don't surge. These people don't tip. And they don't understand how any of it works. You get these calls. So what'll happen is if you're the closest driver, even if you're not close at all, like you're like 20 miles, if you're the quote unquote closest, you still get that call first. And if you don't take it, then you're penalized for it. And if nobody else takes it, it can bounce back to you again. So you can get hit twice from the same call that you've already refused within the last
120 seconds. So the phone beeps and you look at it and it's a passenger 20 miles away and they have a horrible score, like a horrible passenger score, because past drivers have been so angry for doing the trip. The only way they could get revenge on these people is to just decimate their score. So even though it's not telling you where they're going, you can guess with a high degree of certainty that they're not going far. You are being asked to drive 20 miles to go pick these people up, and they're just going down the street. And these are the people, they just don't understand how the system works. They don't understand that you're not getting paid for the majority of the driving that you're doing, that by taking their call, you are getting stuck. And then they're not going to tip you on top of that. So you're being penalized for not doing these trips. But if you do enough of these, it'll put you out of business because you're putting so many dead miles on your car. I mean, not only are you depreciating the hell out of your vehicle, you are seriously increasing the odds it's going to need maintenance. Something could happen along the way, like you blow a tire. There's a million things that can go wrong. These passengers, they get in and they say, I'm just, ... When I hear the word just, my brain shuts off the rest. Just always precedes a destination that is like 2 miles away or less. If you hear the word just when a person gets in, that means $3 or less. I mean, like, you don't want to hear the rest. It makes you too angry. So let me recount the worst example of this that I can remember as a rideshare driver. I mean, I almost fought this person. I was so angry. So I'm driving back from Glenwood. My parents live in a small town. They moved out there after we I shouldn't say they moved. It's more like they retreated out there. We went broke, and they had one building. It's a commercial building. It was in downtown Glenwood, this rural town, 2 hours away from the cities where, when I was growing up, we had a cabin nearby there. So my parents invested in this like small town. So my parents went out and they moved in like this commercial space that like no people should have been living in, but they were living. Anyway, I'm out visiting them, right? And so I'm driving back. This is in the summer of 2015. And right around St. Cloud, which is the midway point between the cities and Glenwood, I would turn Uber and Lyft on. And the reason for that is St. Cloud has about maybe 50,000 or 60,000 people. It's got a large hospital. It has a lot of people that are doing business to and from the cities. So if I'm going to get a ride request from there, like pretty high degree of certainty, that's a person that is going to be traveling the direction that I am going to the cities. That'd be like, like an $80 or $90 Uber ride or maybe more. So driving back, there's a chance that I could just earn some money, or that always seemed like a good prospect to me. So I would turn it on. So I turn it on St. Cloud, and I'm driving, don't get a ride. And as I'm in Andover, so maybe about 25, 30 miles outside of the city, I get a call from a passenger, 5 stars, and it's back about half an hour the direction I had come. And so I look at this and I think to myself, okay, 5 stars, it either means they're brand new or it means they're tipping. If they're calling from way the hell out here, they've got to be going to the airport or something. They've got to be going to the city. There's no way that they would be calling just to go down the street if they're this far away. Surely they have to know how the system works. So I accept the call, and maybe about 10 minutes, I turn around, I'm driving back, and maybe about like 10, 15 minutes into driving back to go get this person, they texted me to want to know how much longer it would be. So I said, 10, 15 more minutes, I'm driving through. It was like a construction labyrinth, and like I took a wrong turn, and it took a while, probably about half an hour, just to get back to this person. So I pull up into this like kind of nice neighborhood, and I'm thinking like, okay, for sure. Pull up into the driveway, I'm waiting, and maybe 26, 27-year-old, like kind of scraggly looking dude comes out. And the fact that he doesn't have any bags with him immediately cues me that it's not an airport run. So I go, oh shit. And I slide the trip to begin, and sure enough, this fucker is just going down the street. Like, he waited half an hour for me to get there. It would have taken him 15 minutes tops to walk it. 10 minutes tops. So I don't even want to talk to this guy when he gets in the car. I'm so mad. When he gets in, he goes, took you long enough. I'm going to be late for work. I was so fuming, man. I didn't say a word. I was almost shaking. So he got out, and I think he picked up that I was pissed, but he couldn't quite figure it out. Well, of course, I gave him 1 star. So that would save any other driver from having to do that. But so all told with this guy, it was close to 70 miles. I probably lost $10 or $15 doing this trip. Not to mention an obscene amount of time. It frustrated me. Here's how much it frustrated me. Even though it was a Friday night, not only did I decide not to drive that night, but I decided I needed to have a vision quest. So I obtained magic mushrooms, and I had like a soul-searching night that night. I mean, I guess obviously I didn't learn anything because I kept driving after that. But, oh God, what a wild night that was, too. That was a night where I mixed 2 different kinds of mushrooms, which I learned you should not do that. And I basically died and came back and died and came back a few times. And I don't know, I got really fucked up, but so do my friends that I did it with. If I decide to do another podcast series when UBERED wraps up, I might talk about that because I've had some fun times doing mushrooms, and I've had some interesting shit happen to me. Real shit, not shit that I hallucinated. But getting back on subject, there's just a few more things I want to talk about. And one of them is people who don't know where they're going. They get in the car and no destination is loaded. And they go, let's see where we're going. And they'll sit there for like 2 minutes and they're like trying to text someone. And I'll look at them and I'll just be looking at them the whole time. And I won't say anything. But the look is, you've had ample time. I'd had to drive here to get here. You've had like 5 or 10 minutes to figure out where you're going. You called me because you wanted to go somewhere. How is it you're dropping the ball here when now it's time to go? You got in the car fine. You came out fine. You didn't even have me wait. But you don't know where you're going. So sometimes they'll sit there and they'll sit there and they'll sit there and then like I'll kind of clear my throat or be like, okay, so like, do you know where we're going? And they'll put in a place and we'll start driving. And then like halfway they're like, oh no, we're actually going to this place. And they'll change it. And the second place that they change it to, it's not even close to the first one. It's like, I've been driving a random direction for no reason. I can't imagine what's behind the thought process or like what's going on. It's usually a young person that's doing this. And I guess I shouldn't complain too much because I am getting paid for it. But Uber and Lyft pay you shit when it comes to time. Like if somebody's late coming out, you make like an extra quarter or something. So it certainly isn't worth the time aspect unless it's like a surge ride, but that was a rare occurrence. Overall, it was just an annoying headache. An even more annoying headache, I've talked a little bit about destination mode, just to recap. Uber and Lyft, instead of making drivers employees, they add these little benefits to the app that it's like, well, you're not going to be an employee, but you're going to be the next best thing. You're going to get these options that kind of help you with your business just a little bit. So one of them is they don't tell you where passengers are going, but they will twice per day on Uber and 6 times per day on Lyft. And I won't get into the nitty-gritties about it. But twice per day on Uber, 6 times per day on Lyft, you can pick the direction that you want to go. It's called destination mode. And the apps will only pair you with people that are going that way. But a gaping flaw in this, so let's say it's really late and I want to go home, and I plug in my home address and I get 3 passengers, let's say. Passenger 1 goes a mile toward the direction I want to go. Passenger 2 goes 3 miles. Passenger 3 goes 10 miles. So now I'm really getting close to home. But passenger 3 has 2 stops. And the app didn't know that, or the app just kind of didn't calibrate it. Stop 1 is on the way. That's the direction I want to go. But stop 2 is the biggest kick in the nuts you can imagine. It's 20 miles away in the opposite direction or something. Something that'll undo everything that you've been working for. And so you have to have an ugly interaction with somebody and tell them, no, I'm not going to do 2 stops. And then they can't wrap their head around why you won't when you're a driver and you've already picked them up. And again, it's one of those things where really the only answer I have for them is I say, don't hate the player, hate the game. If you want a driver who is willing to do everything at your beck and call, no arguments, no back talk, no discomfort with the ride, you need to have a system that has drivers as employees and is protecting them. And that's not what's happening on Uber and Lyft. But before we conclude, listeners, I want to just briefly mention one more group of people that I fucking hated. And that was backseat drivers. If you call a professional, you should not, under any circumstance, criticize that professional for the job that they are doing unless you can blatantly see that they are fucking it up. So, like, if I call the carpet cleaner, I'm not going to start telling the carpet cleaner they missed a spot or some shit. So, like, when I would have passengers in my car that would start backseat driving, like, for no reason, like, I haven't been speeding, I didn't take a wrong turn, I clearly know where I'm going. You can see the fucking navigation up on the phone in front of you. And verbally distracting me when I don't need any help to begin with, that's just going to make things even dicier. You're increasing the odds of an accident. It's not helpful. But what really got me, and this would happen a lot, there were people that would be drunk that would be backseat driving. And it's like, holy shit, there's a reason you called me. Are you kidding me right now? A few times I got so short with people that were drunk and were backseat driving, I offered to go, would you rather be driving? No, I just thought, maybe. Yeah, no, you thought wrong. Shut the fuck up. Or another one, this is like kind of a weird one. You'd have these people, they'd be quiet, they'd be great passengers right up until about the last maybe minute and a half of their trip. And then suddenly, unprovoked out of nowhere, they start backseat driving and directing like you have a giant hole in your head. And it's like, I got this far without your help at all. Why is it you think now I suddenly need your help? What has indicated to you that I'm struggling when we are just nearing the end of the trip, when I've done the entire trip without any assistance at all? What is wrong with you, you fucking weird-ass control freak? Ugh, God. This episode has escalated my blood pressure to a dangerous level, so I think now, for the sake of my heart health, it is a good time to cap it off and call it a wrap. I'd like to remind listeners again that I have 3 books out, both UBERED books, UBERED My Life as a Rideshare Driver, and the sequel UBERED 2. And I have a debut novel that I would love for you to read it. It's called Wolf in the Jungle. First chapter, actually the first 2 chapters, are free on Amazon. All you gotta do is go to the link and you can read it. Or if you're a cheap fuck, if you're in the Hennepin County area here in Minneapolis, the Hennepin County Library is now carrying all 3 of my books. Anyway, that does it for this episode. Listeners, you have been Ubered. I'm Evan Kale, signing off.